I think we can learn a lot about the sort of consequences of trying to control everything in our lives in sort of two distinct ways. And that is trying to control other people, and then as well trying to control the conditions and the environment of our life. And there's a common theme that happens when you try to control something that isn't meant to be controlled, and that is resistance, right? And that resistance that exists between you and another person or you and reality will often sort of manifest itself as frustration because where you're supposed to be detaching, you're actually trying to grasp complete control over. And this usually is because of some sort of self conceived notion and belief that either what we have on our own is not valuable enough, or on the flip side, when trying to control an environment, that if the conditions that we want to be met are not met, that somehow we will have less of an experience, or, if the conditions of our anxious mind aren't met for a particular situation and environment, then for some reason we can't be at that event, or we can't be at that place, or for whatever reason. And I think, sort of a mantra affirmation that I repeat to myself a lot of times is that the universe likes space, ironically. So, and that's everything in the universe as well. So, even when it comes to, working hard towards your goal or anything like that, where most of the time people are saying push, 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 and that's true, you should work hard and everything like that, but there also comes a point where you need to sort of let go and let the results of your labor sort of compound, right? So there's always a letting go that needs to happen for the work that we put in to fully come into effect. And that's the case with our own healing and growth journey as well. We can't always be in self-analysis, observing and sort of self-critique mode. We need to be able to just let go of that all and trust the sort of practices that we've implemented and trust ourselves to live in a way where whatever the present moment holds, we can adapt and we are prepared to deal with it and feel it and be present with it no matter what it may look like. So when we try to control other people, there's a lot of things that can honestly happen. And a lot of times what happens is, imagine someone trying to control you. Imagine someone always breathing down your neck for an answer to a particular situation, someone always trying to force you to do something you don't want to do. Imagine yourself in that situation. Imagine the weight of their expectations on your shoulders. All you really want to do is not do those things. And not because maybe what they want is good for you, but because they're trying to make those choices for you, you sort of rebel because you feel trapped. And this is a pretty normal response because we want to make our own choices. We want to make our own decisions in life. A lot of times, life won't allow us to make our own choices. We have to be somewhere at a certain time where you have obligations and responsibilities. So, in the parts of our lives where we do feel that sort of freedom to choose and make our own decisions, we don't want someone else trying to force those decisions on our behalf. And people respond to control differently. Some people are sort of used to control, so they sort of begin a relationship with the person who is in control in a weird way. A lot of times, we'll see one party trying to control another, and the person who is feeling the weight of those expectations and control will often lead on the other person because they don't want to disappoint them. So they sort of keep them engaged and they say, "Oh yeah, I'll be at this event, or I'll complete this for you, or yeah, we can do that together," anything like that. And they'll sort of keep this string flowing and running so they don't have to disappoint the other person. But then, of course, what happens is they don't follow through with those plans, with that event, with that promise. And this creates an extremely sort of toxic and sour dynamic between the two people. Because now you have one party who is constantly sort of being fed false promises, and what they need to do is realize that they can't control the other person and they need to let the other person breathe and have space and make their own choices. And the other person is sort of too afraid to disappoint the other that they string them along until the very last moment and then leave the disappointment for the very end, which is also unfair. And what they need to do is sort of set strict boundaries and speak their mind and say exactly how they feel. If they feel trapped, they should say, hey, I want to be able to make my own choices. I need a little bit of room to make my own decisions. I respect that you want the best for me, maybe, and I respect that you want to guide me in a way that would be the best for my life, but I'm only going to learn through my own choices, and I don't want to have a lot of frustration and resentment towards you or towards this relationship because I feel trapped and I feel like I have to make choices only because it is you who is pointing me in that direction. So this is I wrote about this in a post, and I think a lot of people were confused when I said that a controlled relationship dynamic often leads to one person sort of leading on the other until the very last moment and the other one sort of just building in frustration. But that's the sort of dynamic that happens. And, if we don't sort of bring awareness to that fact, then we're going to live out some sort of, unconscious, almost karma ridden cycle of toxic relationships where both parties are refusing to grow and accept the things that they need to change about themselves to make the situation work. And that's not what we want. And then we can also borrow from this sort of interpersonal and relational dynamic, and we can understand that a similar dynamic almost exists with reality. When we try to control reality, it sort of backfires on us because we're not staying open to all the possibilities. We're creating our own limitations. We're forcing reality in such a strict sort of constraint for us to be happy, where we're setting such dire and strict conditions on our happiness that we're almost setting ourselves up for disappointment every time. We're almost treating reality and the universe like some sort of cat and mouse game where we're constantly chasing, we're constantly trying to force, we're constantly saying, please meet these conditions, please meet these perfect requirements. And reality is sort of saying, I get it, give me some room. And also, have you not considered that you may have to change the way you're going about things to receive a different reaction from me, right? And it's exactly how it works with interpersonal dynamics as well. Investigate the relationships you have in your life and investigate where there may be frustration, where there may be tension, and see how those relationships change when you give them room to breathe. They may fall apart, they may disintegrate, or they may become reborn. Maybe that one person doesn't have to be talked to every single day, and maybe you once did do that. But now the relationship exists in a more healthy manner because neither of you is requiring that from one another. And so we give space to all of the relationships in our lives, and we're not constantly seeking our entire fulfillment from one person, nonetheless a few different people. And I think this is also really important to acknowledge is that we can do things alone. We shouldn't be afraid to do things by ourselves. And when we don't have that fear of doing things by ourselves, it gives our presence, I think, more magnitude because now we're choosing to enjoy our time and company with other people, but we don't need other people to enjoy ourselves. This is what sort of happens when someone has, and we'll look at this from a very practical standpoint, when someone has an expanded social circle, they might make plans with one group, but they're not going to be hassling and trying to control everyone to fit directly into those plans because they have another, I guess, group of friends that they can sort of call on if those group plans fall apart. But we don't need that. I mean, that's obviously dependent on other people as well. But I'm trying to sort of paint you the picture of how it looks emotionally, where you're coming from a place of, if it happens, great. If it doesn't, I'll also be okay. I'm not going to stress myself over it. And that's what happens in relationships a lot is where the toxic dynamic sort of comes into plays when one person doesn't believe that they can find better elsewhere, so they accept less. And of course, this teaches the mind unruling traits of unworthiness and lacking self-belief in oneself. You have to realize that there's so much for you out there, and to attach so deeply to, you know, a singular point and not understand that you can always expand, you can always experience more. It's not the end of the road just because one path closed. You'll feel more free and you'll feel more sort of liberated from within. Control is something that we're going to sort of probably battle time and time again, because what we want and what our mind tells us to do is to control the environment, control the people, so that we can sort of check off the box of discomfort and uncomfortable feelings from happening, right? So when one person sort of gives us an intense amount of reassurance and all of this stuff, we sort of check that box in our mind. Okay, I don't have to worry about them letting me down. I don't have to worry about them disappointing me. But that's an illusion, because even if that box is checked, that person is separate. They have their own will. They have their own choices. They're free to choose as they want. They can 100% disappoint you down the road and right when the time is critical. So it's not about banking on them not disappointing you. It's about understanding that it's always a risk. There's always a chance they might do that. So when it happens, and if it happens, it doesn't devastate you to the degree that it does now. You can't control other people at all. And you should honestly try a thought experiment and practice this week. See what happens in your life and to your relationships when you start allowing space of other people. When invitations are given as an offer and they're only given once. You don't constantly check up, you don't constantly reassure, you're not constantly trying to straggle plans to fit into a certain way. See what happens, and what's going to happen is you're going to be left with yourself. You're going to be left facing your own frustration and discomfort. You may be faced to do something on your own. You might have to go out of your comfort zone on your own. You might have to change your behaviors. You might have to change the way you're searching for your goals and the way you're trying to find fulfillment. And this is why a lot of people avoid it, because they try it once, they try to detach. They see a post about the law of detachment, and especially when it has to do with people, and they try it for a day, and what they're met with is a sea, an ocean of discomfort and frustration because they're left alone. But being alone isn't the end of the world. Being alone isn't the destination. But just because a certain plan doesn't work out, just because a certain person isn't behaving how you want them to behave, doesn't mean we have to throw away all of our peace and happiness. Instead, we should see that there was always the possibility of that plan falling apart. There was always the possibility of that person disappointing us. And when we keep that in the back of our mind, when it happens, we say, okay, well, that's just what it is. It's time to adjust. It's time to look at things in a different way. What is going to become of the present moment now that that person isn't involved or that plan isn't happening? What am I going to gain from this present moment instead of throwing it away and wasting it sulking and cursing that person and existing in resentment? You have to learn to treat people like flowers and let them be as they are. Don't try to pick them up and control them and decide everything they do. Just let them be, because you'll see when you let them be and they feel free to express themselves in an authentic way, that you, as well as them, both gain from the interpersonal relationship in a way that you wouldn't be able to if control was still a major factor and if the whole thing was based in control. We see this a lot with sort of parental settings and family settings, because the relationship people have with control in their lives growing up is the sort of relationship that they mirror in relationships when they're older. So if someone felt very sort of suffocated by their early childhood and felt like they never had the freedom to express themselves and make choices of their own, they might grow into a very rebellious adult. They might grow into an adult that always is challenging organization and structure and the foundations. They're always looking to break free of something, even if there's nothing to necessarily break free from. Because sometimes a system is good. It's good to have a schedule in place. It's good to have some mundane organization. But if we build such a toxic relationship with control in our early lives, sometimes that will manifest as us constantly trying to break free of something that, like I said before, we don't need to break free from. And in other ways, if people feel as though they had almost too much freedom growing up, they may cling to structure and a system and comfort and organization because they didn't have that growing up. So now they're going to cling to these sort of things, and that might actually trap them because now they never leave that comfort zone because they believe that leaving the comfort zone will only lead to sort of being confused and feeling lost and not really gaining much from life. It's really interesting how our childhood psychology is always and constantly penetrating our adult psychology and our adult life. And I think it's important to realize that how we view control and how we view other people, and whenever we feel the need to control other people, we should take a step back and say, okay, let me take them out of the equation. What am I experiencing and what am I feeling and what am I dealing with within myself? Do I truly want to control that other person? Or rather, am I avoiding doing something on my own? Am I avoiding feeling the uncomfortable feelings of knowing that these plans might fall apart, that this person might not be there when I want them to be there? And so this can be a gradual process as well. We don't have to suddenly, you know, cut everyone off and not contact anyone and only allow people to contact us first. That's not necessarily the case. But like I said before, if you're going to invite someone to do something, let it be an offering. That's all it is. Offer it once. Offer it once, and then let it be. And that's a good measurement of detachment because we can also bring this into any facet of our lives. When it comes to something we're working on, art, creativity, whatever, we participate, we do our best, and then we let it go. And then we let it go. We can't control the every single mechanism of our life. We can't be perfectionists in every part of our life because it doesn't really exist. And oftentimes the process of letting go and letting the sort of practices that we established in the past and trusting the relationships that we have with not only other people but with life and letting them breathe. Letting more of the things in our lives and especially letting more of the relationships in our lives be a reflection of enjoyment rather than necessity. So as you go about your sort of day-to-day routines, as you go about contacting other people, as you go about talking to other people, keep this in mind and see how your relationships are affected positively when you allow space, when you give space. I know I said I was going to do a Q&A in this episode, but I'm actually going to do a Q&A in the next episode. And a couple of you guys already sent me some questions in the form of voice notes, but if you do have a question and you want it to be included in the next episode, just send me a voice note, or if you're on request, just title the message request voice note, and I will most likely get to it and include it in the next episode. Also, if you guys want to buy my books, of course, you can always check them out on shop-kinzer.com or on Amazon. Thanks, guys. See you in the next one.